Hello, everyone. Welcome to Module 5. So far, we've spent a lot of time building the foundation for a strong social media strategy. We've talked about goals and objectives, different types of media, and how to define and research your target audience. This week, we're going to turn our attention to the competitive landscape. We'll look at how to identify and evaluate your competitors, how to benchmark their social media performance, and how competitive research can help you make better strategic decisions for your own brand. Before we get started, let's think about where competitive analysis fits into the larger strategy. We began by asking what it is we're trying to accomplish through our goals and objectives. Then, we considered how we might reach people through the media strategy. In the last module, we focused on who it is we're trying to reach by defining our target audience. Now, we're adding another important question. What exactly is happening around us? Your brand doesn't operate in isolation. Understanding your competitive environment gives you additional context for developing your strategy. A competitive analysis is the systematic process of evaluating your competitors. We're looking at their strengths and weaknesses, their strategies, their content, their positioning, their audience engagement, and their overall performance. This allows us to benchmark our own performance and identify gaps in our strategy. But I want to emphasize something here. The purpose isn't simply to figure out who's winning or who has most followers. We're gathering information that can help us make better decisions about our own strategy. But why should you conduct a competitive analysis? There are several reasons why the competitive analysis is valuable. It helps us identify who our competitors actually are and understand where they're active. We can benchmark performance, identify content and platform trends, discover gaps and opportunities, and recognize potential threats. It can also help us better understand what audiences have come to expect within a particular industry. But competitive research is not about copying what someone else is doing. We're studying the competitive environment so we can learn from it and determine how our own brand can differentiate itself. When we talk about competitors, it's important to recognize that not every competitor is the same. A direct competitor offers a similar product or service to a similar audience. An indirect competitor may solve the same customer problem but in a different way. You should also pay attention to emerging competitors, which are newer or growing brands that could become more important within your market. And in social media, I want you to think about another category: attention competitors. These may not sell the same products as you, but they're competing for the same audience's time and attention. That matters when you're developing a content strategy. Now that you're working through your strategy, you may already know some of your major competitors, but don't assume that your list is complete. You can use search engines, social media searches, keywords and hashtags, industry publications, customer reviews, social listening, and search trends to discover other competitors. AI can also assist with this process, but as we'll discuss later, AI should be a starting point for research rather than the final authority. Ultimately, Ask yourself, who appears when members of my target audience search for the same need, product, service, or topic that my brand addresses? Let's talk about the relevance of keywords. Keywords are especially important because the words you use to search can determine which competitors you find. Let's say you're working with a Miami restaurant. Searching for Miami restaurants is extremely broad. If it's a fine dining establishment, Fine Dining Miami gives you a more relevant competitive set. But suppose the restaurant specializes in upscale Caribbean cuisine. Now, terms such as upscale Caribbean restaurant Miami or fine dining Caribbean food Miami may reveal competitors that are much more relevant. So, your competitive set should reflect your actual market, offering, and target audience. Once you've identified your competitors, the next step is to locate their social media presence. Which platforms are they using? Where are they most active? How frequently are they posting? What types of content are they publishing? And perhaps most importantly, how are audiences responding? You should also look at whether competitors are using every platform in the same way. A brand's TikTok strategy, for example, may look very different from its LinkedIn or Instagram strategy. Don't assume that every platform is equally important simply because the brand has an account there. And once you've located the competitors' accounts, your analysis becomes more systematic. Look at their presence, including their platforms, community size, and posting frequency. Examine their content, including topics, formats, calls to action, and whether the content is original or curated. Then look at audience response. Consider reactions, comments, shares, views, and other visible indicators of engagement. Finally, examine the brand itself. What voice and tone are they using? What does their visual identity look like? How are they positioning themselves? What messages appear repeatedly? The goal is to build a complete picture rather than focusing on one metric. Now, you must go beyond follower count. This is especially important. A large follower count does not automatically mean a successful social media strategy. A competitor may have hundreds of followers, but receive very little meaningful engagement. Another brand may have a much smaller community, but generate active conversions, shares, and strong audience responses. So look beyond followers. Consider engagement, views, and reach when available, the quality of comments, amplification through sharing, posting consistency, audience growth, content, performance, and share of voice. Always ask yourself, is the audience actually responding to the content? Next, examine which types of content appear to perform well. Today, that might include short form video, long form video, images, carousels, stories, live content, educational posts, user generated content, creator collaborations, polls, testimonials, and promotional content. But don't look at one viral post and immediately conclude that you've discovered the competitor's winning strategy. You're looking for patterns over time. Which formats consistently perform well? Which topics repeatedly generate engagement? And which types of content seem to fall flat? That's much more useful than focusing on a single successful post. You should also pay attention to how competitors communicate. How do they address their audience? Is the voice professional, conversational, humorous, bold, educational, or something else? Is that voice consistent across platforms? Look at the values and personality communicated through their content. Also, consider what seems to distinguish the brand from others in the same space. Then connect this back to what you learned in Module 4. Who appears to be the audience for this communication? And ultimately, ask whether the approach appears to be working. Competitive analysis becomes particularly valuable when you stop looking only at what the competitors are doing and begin looking for what they're not doing. Are there audience needs that no one seems to be addressing? Are customers repeatedly asking questions that remain unanswered? Are there content formats competitors aren't using effectively? Are there platforms where your target audience is active but competitors have a weak presence? Customer frustration can also reveal opportunities. These gaps matter because a competitive gap can become a strategic opportunity for your brand. Another concept I want you to become familiar with is share of voice or SOV. Share of voice allows us to compare our brand's visibility or presence within a competitive space. Depending on what we're measuring, this might include brand mentions, social conversions, search visibility, media coverage, or advertising presence. Essentially, we're asking how much of the conversation within our competitive space belongs to us compared with our competitors. But there's an important distinction. More visibility isn't necessarily better if the conversion surrounding your brand is negative. That's why share of voice should be considered alongside measures such as sentiment and engagement. Once you've gathered your competitive information, you can use those insights to inform your SWOT analysis. SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Strengths and weaknesses are internal. Strengths are things your organization or brand does particularly well, while weaknesses are internal areas where improvement may be needed. Opportunities and threats are external. Opportunities are conditions in the external environment that the brand may be able to take advantage of, while threats are external conditions that could negatively affect the organization. The internal versus external distinction is extremely important when you're developing a SWOT. Let's make that a little more concrete. A strength might be strong engagement, distinctive content, a loyal community, or a recognizable brand voice. A weakness could include inconsistent posting, low engagement, limited platform presence, or weak differentiation. An opportunity might emerge because you've discovered an underserved audience, a competitor content gap, an emerging content format, or a change in audience behavior. Threats might include new competitors, platform changes, changing consumer behavior, economic conditions, or regulatory changes. Notice that opportunities and threats come from the external environment. They're not simply things the brand wants to improve internally. Now, over the last couple of weeks, we've been talking a bit about AI. It's important to consider where it fits into the competitive analysis. AI can help organize large amounts of information, summarize competitor content, identify recurring themes, compare messaging, analyze sentiment, and help us identify patterns that might otherwise take much longer to find. But competitive intelligence generated by AI still needs to be verified. If you ask an AI tool to identify your competitors and simply accept the list it provides, you haven't actually completed a competitive analysis. You still need to visit those platforms, examine the content, check the data, and understand the context. So, just as we discuss with the audience research, use AI to support your analysis, not replace your research or strategic judgment. Let's talk tools. There are many tools available to support competitive analysis, and these will continue to change. For social listening, you may encounter tools such as BrandWatch, TalkWalker, and Mention. For search and SEO research, tools such as SEMrush, Google Trends, and Google Keyword Planner can be useful. Platforms such as Sprout Social and Hootsuite also offer social media management and competitive benchmarking capabilities. And don't overlook the native analytics available through platforms such as Meta, TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn. You don't need to master every tool on this slide. What I want you to understand is what these tools can help you learn. Tools will essentially change, but the strategic questions will certainly remain. I want to make one final distinction before we wrap up. Competitive analysis should follow a process of learning, identifying gaps, differentiating, and improving. It should not become a process of watching, copying, or repeating. Remember that your competitors developed their strategies for their goals, their audiences, their resources, and their brands. Something that works extremely well for one competitor may not make sense for your organization. Use competitive intelligence to strengthen your strategy and identify opportunities to be different, not to become a copy of someone else. So let's bring everything full circle. Competitive analysis helps us understand who we're competing with, where they're active, what they're doing, how audiences are responding, where opportunities may exist, and how our own brand can differentiate itself. The purpose of all of this research is not to become more like your competitors. The purpose is to understand the environment in which you're operating so that you can make better strategic decisions for your own brand. I've included several resources and tools here and in the modules that you may encounter when conducting competitive research. As you continue working in social media, remember that the tools, platforms, features, metrics, and AI capabilities available to practitioners will continue to evolve. Rather than relying on one particular tool, focus on understanding the research process and the strategic questions you're trying to answer. As you move into the activities and assignments for this module, I want you to think about competitive analysis not simply as observing what other brands are doing, but as a tool for identifying opportunities to strengthen and differentiate your own strategy.